Hello everyone, it's Miss Seichter. So I will be showing my virtual learners how to do a printmaking project at home with the supplies that you received in your art kit. So by now you should have a regular piece of drawing paper, some kind of computer paper that is roughly the same size as your foam plate. This is what we will be using to print. You should have received nicer, thicker drawing paper that we will use to print our image onto. And the smaller paper that's about the same size as your plate is what you do your final draft on after creating your thumbnail sketches. Now, when doing this, you need to think about positive space. Now, my positive space is very large. All the area within my UFO and the light beam, all of that can be considered positive space, and all of this background, the outer space part, is considered the negative space. So I made intentional decisions to make my subject matter or my positive space very large. We also talked a little bit about leading lines, and although this is not really a C curve or an S curve, there is a leading line that kind of leads down to another focal point. In order to transfer this onto my foam plate, I'm going to tape it down just so that it doesn't move around on me. And I am glad that I colored the parts that I wanted black and the parts that I wanted green, because that's going to come into play a little later. And in order to transfer that, I'm going to trace over my image all the lines I want to show up. This is not really part of the printing process. This is just part of the transferring process. So I'm going to press pretty hard enough that I know I'm making an indent. And if you're not sure if it's making an indent, you can peek. I can kind of tell, but I think I could press harder. I'm using a pen because pens have a metal tip to them, and I know that it can make a better indent. And I'm actually tracing around those black areas here. I want to treat all of my lines as if they are shapes. So this line that cuts into my UFO, I need to treat that like a shape, or I will have a hard time figuring out what to print. Now, my design might be a little bit more complicated for this project, especially since I have some black outlines and some white outlines. Now, for these white areas, I don't think I'm going to trace them as shapes, and you'll see in a little bit why. Because white is a freebie color. White is the part I will be carving away first. But black requires black ink, so I definitely need to treat that like a shape. And I could do this step, but I could eyeball this later for sure with the stars. Now, if I remove this, I should see the faintest outline of my drawing. This is not part of the printing step yet. This is just part of the transferring step. So I might want to keep this close by to reference. Tape that down so we can see it a little better. And you have a wooden tool right here. This is what you will use to carve away your image. There will be an indent where you carve. So I'm going to, and I can kind of see, if you can't, you could maybe draw directly on your plate. Everything that I press or indent here will be an indent, and therefore the ink won't stick to those areas because it's too out of the way and hidden underneath the surface of this plate. So everything I'm pressing, everything I'm carving right now will remain white like the paper when I print with this. So everything is outlined here. I could still get those stars though. And I have some bigger areas that need to be white as well. So that means that I need to go back in, and I have two options. I can either press with my tool to make that white area indented, or I could cut away those areas. If you have a scissors at home, that's great to use. Otherwise, if you have an X-Acto blade, that makes things go a lot quicker, which is why I have a cutting board underneath me. I don't think I want to do it that way because I still want my Starbucks coffee to be green. And if I cut away all this white area, this is going to be cut out as well. So I think I'm going to use the flatter end of this tool and carve away in a way that kind of accentuates the line direction. So that's looking like that is done. I'm going to print with my first color. Now, you should leave black for your last, unless there is a strategic reason why you should use black first. Usually black is good at covering up your other colors. These other colors are not so good at covering up black. So I provided these paint brushes, and things are about to get messy. So you're gonna want some kind of mat underneath you. Your fingers might get messy. We're gonna be using ink. Ink, specifically this kind of ink, is water soluble. So you can wash that off of your hands with water and soap. You can wash it off of your table with water and soap, but it's pretty hard, just because it tends to get everywhere, and you definitely don't want to get this on your clothes. So I'm going to paint everything this green color. Now, this is not paint. We really shouldn't be calling this paint, just because it isn't. I'm just going to be putting this over everything, except I think I can avoid these whiter areas. Typically with printmaking, you can you don't have to worry about those areas as much, because if they are carved away well, they won't retain any ink. However, since this is a foam plate, everything's a little bit more on the shallow side. And you want to work pretty quickly, because this is ink. This is going to stay wet a little longer than paint, but you don't want it to dry, or if it's dry, it won't transfer onto paper very well. And you can see in some areas that the green is not going inside of the cracks, and if it is, it's not really that noticeable yet. And the reason why I carved away the white areas to be in a specific direction is because if I do accidentally get ink on those areas, it will look strategic, it might look really nice, it might help my design. So working pretty fast here. And the idea with printmaking is you make multiple prints that are roughly the same. So after making one print with this green, you can refrain from washing your plate and just do another layer on another piece of paper, and just keep going, making multiple layers until you're done using green. Now, if I am curious about what that white might look like, maybe I can get a little bit of this ink on there just to kind of see. I think I might, just kind of curious. So I'm going to do a little bit of this, just to see. And I want my ink to be thick enough that I know that it will transfer, but not too thick that it fills in those holes. And we'll see how this goes. Again, working fast is important. So I'm going to lift this off. I think I need to focus on holding it from an area that doesn't have any ink on it. And I want to put this, it doesn't matter really at this stage whether I put the paper down first or if I put the plate down onto that paper the other way, but I'm just going to do it like this. And the moment your paper touches that foam plate, you don't want to lift it off again. And I'm going to be pressing pretty hard. This hand is holding it steady. This hand is pressing. And the big reveal, what I need to do is kind of peel that off. And there's my image. I think I can do better a second time. I'm gonna see what happens if I add just a little bit of water to my ink. So here we go. I think I'm gonna get my brush and the ink just a little on the wet side. Should be working with some kind of mat underneath me. Again, if you have some kind of newspaper that you want to put underneath your work as kind of a layer to protect whatever table or surface you're working on. So all I'm doing is dipping my brush in the ink and then in a little bit of water just to kind of make it so that it may be more easily transferable. And I think it may be best if I ignore those bigger white areas. Now I need to hold this steady. I think I got to put my finger on a white area like this. Now the more you work with this, the more whatever surface you're working on underneath that's clearly getting all of this ink ends up picking up that ink. So it might be smearing on the back of this foam plate, which might cause fingerprints, craftsmanship issues later along the line. And we're gonna see if this, little bit of an experiment, if this, using a little bit more water, is helping us out, or if it's not. So here's my plate, here's my paper. And you don't want it to smudge around or smear. You can kind of feel if the foam plate underneath it has moved. If that happens, your print is not going to be a good one. I'm just using the palm of my hand. Circular motions are what I tell people in class with their tools and materials. Let's peel this off, the big reveal. Adding a little bit of water, I think helped a little bit. Now I'm going to wash off this plate once you're done doing half of your prints, because I believe at home, just with time, you guys should be working on making 2 different designs. So half of your papers have prints on them. For design number 1, I think I'm going to wash this off and show you what to do with black ink. So this has been washed. Some of the ink is still settled inside of some of those crevices. What I want to do is print all the areas I want black. So a couple ways. People in person are told with their materials to use their carving tool and carve away all the areas they want to remain this green color. However, with this material, it doesn't work so well. So you're gonna go in with a scissors and cut out all of the areas you want just black. Now that is already labeled out here. The only areas I want black are the outer space areas. Now this is tricky because if I cut this out, I have 3 different black areas. I can either be okay with that or just short of getting to the edge, I cut along so that it keeps that little border. And this is why I left that outline where my spaceship is here, because I want that to be black. I want that to be the same color as the sky. I don't want to lose that area. I wanted to incorporate that ink color inside of my spaceship. So if you are able to achieve this with a scissors, that's awesome. If you have an X-Acto blade and your parents' permission and maybe supervision, you can use this. Safety is important, so when using an X-Acto blade, if you are able to use that, always cut away from yourself. Always use a mat underneath you. Don't cut towards your body and don't cut with your hands in front of the way of the blade. And again, this is a very destructive way of printing. So I need to be absolutely sure I'm done with all of my green before moving on to this. So these are the only areas I need to stay black. So getting these ready, and I'm going to get a little messy. I'm going to use a clean brush, and I found that adding a little bit of water to this helps. It's whatever works for you. Because ink is a pretty sticky, thick material. So working fast, and I don't want to get any of this ink onto my paper, I like to start printing with my least favorite print first, just because if it doesn't turn out, I can learn from that mistake and do it better on the prints that I really like. I need to line up my foam plate with my drawing. Try to get it as exact as you can, but you know the moment it touches that paper, you don't want to lift it off. You don't want to adjust it. Putting it ink side down. And yep, I'm getting messy. My fingers are getting messy. Hopefully you are wearing some kind of shirt that is either a messy old shirt that you don't mind getting dirty, or some kind of paint shirt. I'm gonna, now that it is stuck to my paper, flip it upside down, press on it from the back. And I've found circular motions help, but the important part is the foam plates on the other side are not moving around on me. So I may be working a little bit more delicately this time around because of all those tiny little pieces. But pressing hard, pressing with circular motions. I don't care if the back gets too smudgy as long as it's not on the front. But usually if the back is getting smudgy, the front is more likely to because of messy fingers. Oop, I got messes. And that is about the process. Just for curiosity's sake, I'm gonna see if the second time around on the print that I liked a little bit more turns out a little better. Maybe if I use a little more ink this time around. And maybe if I work a little faster. Yeah, and I think this one turned out a lot better. Just using a lot more ink and getting it a little bit more wet, like using this as a little bit of a paint palette by introducing a little bit of water, worked a lot better for me because it filled in some more of those areas. So hopefully by the end of this project, you are able to create 2 different designs, just for the sake of time, because people in person will be doing a much more time-sensitive, laborious kind of process. While as you guys, this will be much quicker for you. So 1 design on half of your papers, work on a second design on the other half, you're gonna turn in your 1 best print for a grade, which in these 2 cases is this one, because the ink filled in more. I'm able to see what it is a little bit better. So good luck with your printmaking projects.